Okay, so today is what is today? Today's Wednesday, September 19th, right?
Yeah.
We're doing this interview for the oral history oral interview assignment. This is my grandfather, Randall Marburger. Okay, so with these questions, like, we can go in depth as you want, or as brief as you want. It's up to you, like how much information you have. And then I'll probably check this a few times as we go through, and I'll edit everything afterward to make sure it flows pretty well. So I guess we'll just start off. So, how far back have you traced our family history?
Well, the Marburgers go back into the late 1600s, and the Suttons into the 1600s. The Waldrons, I'm pretty sure, back into the 1600s. Canlisses, I can't remember, but I know that it goes back into at least the 1700s, because they came here in the 1790s and settled where the farm still is now. So I can't remember how far back I've seen it beyond that, but
Yeah.
it goes back a ways.
Well, and I guess I could have done this as a separate question, and in retrospect I might actually put it in as one of these questions, but what were the different countries of origin then for those different families?
The Suttons were England. Marburgers were Germany, and the Waldrons, I'm pretty sure, were Dutch. And the Canlisses were Irish, but they were Scots-Irish, so they had left Ireland and gone to Scotland and then came here.
Okay. That's a pretty good representation. So
Well,
which one did you say was the first to come over then?
I can't remember. I know the McCandlesses were here in the 1790s.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure the Suttons and the Waldrons were before that. The Waldrons, well, and the Walls too. The Waldrons and the Walls both had fought in the Revolutionary War, and they both received Revolutionary War grants of 5,000 acres each, and that made up half of what is Evans City now.
Okay.
There were 4 land grants that came together around where the train station was, and the one on below the creek towards Zillionople was the Hall ones, there were 5,000 acres that went down basically along where 68 is now, and across the creek. And the Waldrons went up 68, and we're reaching back close all that into part of the Waldrons, 5,000 acres.
Yeah, and you said that's all around like the train station there, like in Evans City, like the center one there.
So the Marburgers were kind of latecomers in compared to all the rest, because they didn't come until 1838. So that was long after all the other parts. So now and I didn't mention the fairs. They go back to England too, and it was either the fairs or the Sutton, somewhere in there, the American Fish. So did you know you were descended from fish?
No, I don't think I've heard that name before.
I forget. It was pretty far back. It was would have been Pap the grandma's 3 or 4 greats, I think. It was a fish. So you know who all the Fairs and Waldrons and the Glens I didn't mention. I don't think at all.
I don't really recognize many of those names. Like, I recognize the first couple you went through because those are like the big ones, you know, that we're connected to, but I didn't recognize a lot of the other ones.
Grandma Sut, she was a fair.
Okay.
So that's where the fairs came from. Her mother was a store, I think. And store stair. And I don't really remember too much about them. So Pap, his mother was a Waldron. So that's where the Waldrons come in.
Okay.
And Grandma Georgie was, of course, in Kansas. And her mother was a Glen. And Glen was in a little fuzzy one, too. And then Pompey, his mother was a Waldron. So that's where the Walls can be. And it's W-A-H-L.
Okay.
So the Walls and the Waldrons were the two that had, both been in the Revolutionary War. So those families can trace back past them.
Yeah.
But they were both in the United States then because they got those land grants from fighting.
Yeah. Let's see. So, I guess then moving on, what is the most important aspect of our family history in your opinion? Like, whether that's like where we came from or like our time here in the States or anything like that. Like whatever you consider to be like, there's one thing that you could like define as like the defining aspect of our family, what would it be?
I found it hard to answer just what the most important aspect was. I think for me there's always a diversity there that I can't ever remember any particularly strong ethnic identities because everyone had been in this country for over 100 years and for every all the descendants in the family, so there wasn't this sense of real ethnic identity.
Because they were like, that's some of those dates are like really on the very early end of like immigration, like before almost like the like immigration period,
Yeah, I mean there were some of them were really early.
Yeah.
And so a piece of that I find interesting, now is that there was always a sense that we were Americans, but there was always this acknowledgement that that we come from these other places. And I grew up with just this understanding that newcomers, in that sense that they hadn't been here for that long, were welcome. I don't remember experiencing any of the prejudice that I now realize was so much a part of the times that I grew up in. But I didn't experience that, or at least very little of that.
Because, I guess so in a sense, like, your family, like, they had the thought that, like, hey, we also came from another place. Like, there's no reason to, like, hold that origin against any of these people that are coming over now.
And there was this, an example. I didn't realize until a year or two ago. I knew there was a lot of prejudice against Italians at some points in our history. I didn't realize until a couple of years ago how really strong and really prevalent the anti-Italian bias was in the 1920s, and how Italians don't need to apply kind of thing, and just real disdain and almost hatred for them, and then having found that out and realizing that my dad, who was born in 1930, was named for an Italian neighbor.
Oh wow!
So in the midst of all that prejudice and hatred,
Yeah.
here, and growing up in a county that was probably 99% white and 99% Christian. We had neighbors that were Jewish, and we had neighbors that were black, and I don't remember experiencing prejudice against them. I mean, they were just neighbors, and they were treated the way other people were treated that were neighbors, and I didn't have this sense of this the real prejudice that was there, and one of the things that really struck me, and this was whenever I was 12 or 13, when the Supreme Court ruled that you couldn't force people to read scripture and say the Lord's Prayer at the beginning of the school day. And most everyone that I knew, the adults that I was around, were up in arms about that ruling. And I remember my dad one night at the supper table saying, well, he thought it was about time. And I was like, really surprised, because that's not what I was hearing from other adults.
Yeah.
And I was in 6th grade, and when he said, well, it's about time, he said, well, I never thought that it was fair that the Herschel Sachs, who was Jewish, who was in the same school with him, that he had to read from the New Testament, and he had to say the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
And I was like, it was just like a real revelation that he had seen the injustice of that.
Yeah.
A quarter of a century before it, and when everybody else was up in arms about it, he was like, well, we should have done this a long time ago.
Yeah. That's cool.
And then he had this interesting relationship with George McGee, who was one of the black neighbors, and more often than not, we referred to George as George the nigger. But there was always this respect for George, and I never. I was surprised when I got older and realized that word had a really negative connotation to it.
Yeah.
Because when it was used with George, I never got any of that.
Yeah, it wasn't used that way, but
and George, he was around a lot, and my dad had this really interesting relationship with them. They teased each other and went back and forth, but my dad would help George, and they would argue over George liked to go through the fields after we picked the corn and pick the corn up that had fallen on the ground. And there were certain places my dad didn't want to do that. And my dad said he could go to another farm, which is 4 miles away, to go. Like George, his transportation was a horse and wagon, so he didn't want to go there. So my dad would say, well, I'll drive you there, and you can pick up the corn, and I'll drive you back. But then George would sneak into the fields where he didn't want him to be. And then when George's horse died, the whole community went together and helped them, buy a new horse. And so there were a lot of ways that he and my dad just interacted. And then George, when you asked him how old he was, he said he didn't know, but his pappy was a slave. And he apparently had come to the area around the time my dad was born. That one seemed to be terribly clear, including George. But he was there long before I was there. And he lived in a one-room house with an outhouse over the little stream that passed. But we would frequently on Sunday afternoons, we would stop and George would come out and we'd visit for half an hour or an hour. He'd just stand there and talk to us. And one of his prized possessions was a picture that he had of Beck and I, which he would go with the horse into town and tie the horse up at a tree where it died one day. And then he would go about town, but he would go about going through the garbage, and it was, the tree was behind the photographer's studio, and so we went through the pictures that had been thrown out. He found this picture of us and always had all his men on until his house burned down.
Yeah.
And when the house burned down, that was one of the things he lamented the most. He didn't have a picture anymore. But then the whole community went together and got a new house. And it wasn't a house like other people had, but it was a house better than what he had before, and put it in place for him. And then George, when we saw George, he was always out in the fields or over the barn. He was never at our house. We'd stop at his house, but we were in the car. And he'd never been to our house, but a couple weeks after my dad was killed, he came to the house and gave my mother an envelope with like $400 in it.
Holy cow.
Which my mother made another friend take back to him, because it was like, George doesn't have any money.
Yeah.
But it kind of drove home to me how close that relationship was between the two of them.
Yeah.
Which, and of course, in '68, that was at the height of the civil rights movement, and all of the, it was getting, fortunately, towards the end of the most outrageous things that we had done, to black people in the '60s. But I grew up with a whole different view on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is pretty unusual. I realize now for the time period and for the place.
Yeah.
So I guess that's that was an important aspect.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That's great. And then I guess for question 3, now I've always the Marburger family dairy has always been something that's kind of it's been this established thing that's been there for our family, just a little bit back in our family. But can you describe the history of the Marburger family dairy?
Well, 80 years ago, it was kind of gets down to, I think the next question too kind of blends together with, but basically from starting the 1840s, and it took a while to develop, but the farm eventually became extremely well known for their horses, and so people would bring mares, and we're talking work horses, from large areas. I mean, sometimes even from other states.
Oh, wow.
Would bring them in to be bred by the stallions that were kept at the farm. And of course, by the 1830s, people weren't buying workhorses anymore. So the demand for the stallions to breed other horses was rapidly disappearing, and that had been the mainstay of the livelihood for 70 or 80 years anyway.
Yeah.
More than that. So it's like, what do you do? Because you've been breeding horses to work, pulling wagons, working fields, doing all the kinds of things that were done with horses, and now machinery is replacing them everywhere, and by the 30s even on the farms. So, and another development that was taking place at the same time was of course electrification was coming, even though, by that time it was at the farm, and along with electrification was coming refrigeration. So, and then on top of that was pasteurization of milk. So milk was becoming something that had gone from being something very locally. I mean, if you wanted milk, you had a cow.
Yeah. Because you couldn't
now-
really transport it or keep it.
Now there's a way to transport it and a way to process it that and to refrigerate it so it would keep. And there was a growing demand for it, and so they had been milking some cows, and for a while they'd sent it into Pittsburgh on the trolley, but by that time the trolley was gone, so now it was being taken by truck down into the North Hills of Pittsburgh to another dairy to be processed, and so my grandfather thought, well, he could cut out the other person and the transportation that way, and start processing it right there.
Yeah.
And he thought that he could make it go. Now the other thing that he had been involved in, and apparently this kind of evolved also along with the lessening demand for draft horses, and also I think with the Depression was he had been buying. He was frequently buying properties, and he would buy properties, harvest the timber, and then sell the property for basically what he paid for it. But he had sold timber and made money, so he had some capital from doing that, and he also had, I think part of it was he knew the community and knew a lot of people, from doing that. So that involvement in the community, the transportation changing, the refrigeration changing, the lessening demand for the draft horses, all of it kind of went together, and he's like, okay, I think I could process milk and sell it and maybe make a living from doing that, because something different needed to be done. He started that with a partner, but it was a short time, I forget, 6 months or a year, till he bought the partner out, and then he built a small building on a farm, and started processing the milk there and selling it. It was a very small amount to begin with. And Grandma made the butter at the house, sold that, and then she also started making buttermilk, which people liked. And so it slowly grew, and they got trucks and one at a time, and started developing routes to sell it mostly locally, and then down into what's now known as the North Hills of Pittsburgh, which at that time was still pretty rural.
Yeah.
So by the time I was born, there were 3 or 4 routes, I think, and then when I was pretty small, there was tension developing because the farm was owned by Poppy and Wally, his brother, and Wally's 2 sons had one of them had a farm in Mercer, and the other one had gone to college in Roy. Roy was my dad's age, and Roy had a job, and so neither one of them were going to come back and work on the farm. Wally really didn't do anything with the dairy, and it was Poppy that started it, but because the property was owned by both of them together, the business was basically owned by both of them together, even though just one of them was doing it.
Yeah.
So, and then the industry, and it was just beginning to be an industry then, was moving from cans, which, when I was little, when you milked the cows, it went into the milker, you poured it into a bucket, and you carried the bucket to the end of the barn where there were cans with strainers on top, and you poured it through the strainer, and the milk went into the bucket, or into the can, and then you took the can and put it in a cooler that was a water tank that had cold water.
Okay.
And so that's what cold milk, and then you had to load the cans on a truck after they were cold and take them to wherever they were going to be processed.
Okay.
And for a lot of people, that meant taking them to the railroad station, and having them taken to Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So, Poppy had started, by that time, going to some other farms and saying, okay, I'll come and pick your milk up, in the cans. Well, by the mid-50s, the industry was just beginning to move from cans to bulk tanks. And so my dad and his brothers and Poppy all kind of realized that they needed to go in that direction. But to go in that direction meant lots of major changes. So the dairy had to be changed. You had to get, first of all, you had to get a tank truck to transport the milk.
Yes.
And then you had to have a tank room where you could back the truck in and unload it, because it had to be inside, to do that. So that meant, a big addition to the existing building.
Yeah, a big investment.
And so you had to invest in adding on to the building. You had to invest in the truck. And you had to get a bulk tank for our own farm. And then had to get the other shippers, the other farmers, to also buy bulk tanks. So the other shippers was a kind of a different problem, but the problem with doing all of those additions, improvements at home was, it was coming, the desire to make that and spend that was, coming from one branch of family, and the other branch of family owned half the property.
Yeah.
So, my dad's one brother in particular really pushed for the business to be incorporated and to buy Wally out.
Mhm.
And Grandma and Poppy were really reluctant to do that. So there was a lot of family tension, and it went on for apparently a long time. I realized there was tension. I was too little to really understand what it was about. Grandma got really sick and ended up in the hospital, and I was told later that it was kind of, she just did it herself, was a way of stopping the tension and trying to shift gears.
Yeah, yeah.
But eventually they did buy Wally out and did incorporate.
Okay.
And did all those improvements, and there was more problems because one of the shippers was George and Lawrence, who were cousins of my dad's, and they were really angry and refused to buy bulk tank, and so they started shipping to someone else, which led to a lot of hard feelings. And then like 3 years later, the dairy they started shipping to told them they had to get a bulk tank anyway. So there were a lot of changes going on there, but there was a lot of demand because by the late 50s, just about every home had a refrigerator. Now the refrigerators by today's standards were small.
Yeah.
And so you delivered milk 3 days a week to each route.
Yeah.
Was 3 days a week. So you had Monday, Wednesday, Friday routes, you had Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday routes. Well, by the mid-60s, most of the employees were not wanting to work 6 days a week, which in the early 50s, 6 days a week was still pretty common. But by the mid-60s, 6 days a week was much less common, and they didn't want to do that. So my dad had started to change a lot of the routes to 2 days a week. And then there were some 3 days. And part of the reason we couldn't do that was because by that time refrigerators were becoming larger. So you could get enough milk in 2 deliveries to hold you over. Where before that was tricky to do. So and when I was growing up, the business was like 90% retail, maybe 95% retail. The wholesale was basically just some stores and restaurants and schools relatively close to home. And of course now it's changed. I don't know what, probably like 80% wholesale and 20% retail.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really changed. But,
it kind of like shifted back a little bit.
Well, yeah, because people, it's one of the few dairies that has always had home delivery. But as more and more women entered the workforce, the problem became that there was no one at home to get the milk and put it in the refrigerator.
Okay, yeah.
And when I was little, there were not a lot, but there were still places where, we just walked into the kitchen and put the milk in the refrigerator, whether anyone was home or not.
Yeah.
You just did that, and people expected you to do it.
Yeah, like a different time with that.
Other places you put it in a box, which was insulated, and that would keep it for a while. But if someone was working all day and the milk was getting delivered at 10 o'clock in the morning,
it's not going to
by
work.
the time they got home. So, and then also grocery stores, became larger and larger, and so it became easier to get milk at stores.
Yeah, just buy it.
And they were open longer hours. And also the switch was going on from glass bottles to first paper cartons, and then by the mid to late 60s, plastic was starting to come into being with more cartons. So that made it a little easier too to buy milk at the store. You didn't have to worry about juggling around and getting a glass bottle home without breaking it.
Yeah. Gosh.
So there were lots of changes, and they did a relatively good job of doing the changes. And then by the 70s, because of all those changes, a lot of dairies were going out of business, and so frequently we bought other dairies for accounts receivable, which meant they gave you the route, which was the list of all the customers and what they got, and they would tell the people, okay, we're not going to be delivering to you anymore. Marburgers would start delivering to you. And see, most people paid their milk bill at the end of the month or the beginning of the month. So they got a bill at the end of the month, and then they paid for it. So you were always behind. You're delivering the milk, and a lot of times you don't get paid for it for a month or maybe 2 months after you deliver it.
Okay, yeah.
And so when they gave you their routes for accounts receivable, then whatever the people owed the day the transition took place, you had to collect that, and then actually what they did was just, that's what they gave them for. So we had to collect it to reverse what we had already paid them for it. And sometimes you had trouble. Sometimes people's milk bill would be $50 or $100 a month, and then they wouldn't pay. And you can't go back and get it.
Yeah.
I mean, once they've got the milk. So
that's true.
Which in today's world, it's like no one would want to do that. But I think that's still the way they are with the home delivery.
So, okay, quickly before we move on, you're saying that they still do home deliveries now?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, that's crazy. Like, I had no idea that they still did the home deliveries. Like, I just assumed that was totally totally done.
No, all through the North Hills and down. And when we were in Newcastle, we were getting milk delivered from this. It was called Wallace Dairy. And one day there was a note that said they weren't going to deliver anymore because the guy who was delivering, his father and his uncle, or maybe 2 uncles, they had the farm and they processed the milk. This guy just delivered the milk. Well, the father and the uncle decided they were retiring.
Okay, yeah.
And so he didn't have milk to deliver, so I called Marge, and of course she was at the dairy then, and I told her, and I said, why don't you get a hold of this guy, because maybe you can sell him milk. So he became the biggest customer.
Oh wow.
And they took the milk to his Culver outside of Newcastle, and then he kept his routes the way he had them, and just delivered Marburger's milk instead of Wallace milk. So for a little while we had Marburger's milk delivered.
That's cool.
The only time I ever got to do that.
Yeah.
Because I've not lived anywhere else where they delivered milk.
Yeah. Okay, so, and then question 4 is what major events in U.S. history, or what major event, if there's one big one, most affected our family?
I think that's what I was saying in the other one. Was
the
change in transportation, electrification, the refrigeration.
Yeah.
And so with the change in transportation, the lack of demand for draft horses.
Yeah. So it was kind of like, since our family was kind of in a field of providing sort of the services, then as things changed, they kind of had to adapt with it, and then that led down the whole path of like doing the whole dairy thing. Whereas in theory, without those changes, they would have continued on without even like really breaking into that. So
Yeah, because, I mean, as long as there was demand for draft horses, they were,
Yeah.
making a good living with that, but.
And I wanted to ask this before, like, it just kind of like, but do you know how much they charged for, like, that breeding service?
No, I have no idea.
It must have been fairly decent, though, if they were able to, like, keep going off of just that. Like, it
Yeah.
must have been pretty good.
Yeah, well, there were always had a number of stallions, and I've never really heard the number of stallions. But like when the barn burned in 1912,
Mm-hmm.
the boiler exploded outside of the barn. It was running the thrashing machine.
Uh-huh.
And it scalded Uncle Osmon's. And then, of course, and quickly the fire spread onto the barn floor. And so, the men were all busy with Osmus and with the fire. And Aunt Minnie, who was married and living away by that time, she was at home. But and Aunt Minnie was little. But she knew that the stallions were, that's what
That's
what
money
he lived,
maker. Yeah.
that's what he lived on. So she went into the barn, it was on fire, and let the stallions out. Now the stallions weighed like 2,400 pounds.
Yeah.
And Aunt Minnie was like 5 foot tall.
Yeah.
So but she knew that if the stallions died in the fire, that would.
That was it.
There was nothing to bring any income in.
Yeah.
That was where the bulk of the money.
So they were able to get pretty much all the stallions out then? Or?
She got the stallions out.
Okay.
I don't ever remember I don't ever remember anyone saying that any horses died in the fire.
Okay.
But she got them out.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then, okay, so the next question 5, is what is the best like family story that you've heard? Like a story that you might have heard from the family that was passed down that was like a family story. Like what was the best one that you think you've heard?
Well, the one I tend to go back to was when they put the railroad through the farm. So they bought the farm in 1842, and in the early 1890s, the B&O got the right of way to come through almost the middle of the farm.
Uh-huh.
And of course, that was a huge project that took, I don't know how many years it took to build that line. And it went from Pittsburgh, and I was never clear how far it went west, but it was two tracks, one for each direction. And so this would have been my grandfather was 2 or 3 years old, and so at that time, his grandparents were still both alive. His Marburger grandparents were still both alive, so they lived in the house too. And so by that time, there were 4 or 5 children in my grandfather's family. At least 5 or maybe 6 by that time. And so his mother and I think grandmother together, they would bake the bread, and you baked once a week, and you made enough bread to do the whole week. And of course, bread was, it was a real staple. I mean, you had bread with every meal.
Yeah.
And you had lots of bread. I mean, even when I was growing up, I would, for breakfast I would have at least 4 slices of bread, and for lunch I would have at least 2 sandwiches, 4 slices of bread, and for supper, you always had bread on the side, and probably 4 slices then.
Yeah.
So, so I wasn't unusual. I was eating a minimum of 12 slices of bread a day.
Okay. Yeah.
So the whole family was doing that, and probably in those days they were eating even more than what I was eating when I was growing up. So, they baked a lot of bread.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this Sunday night, the railroad brought a boxcar filled with black men and dropped them off on on the farm, which between the middle hill and the hill towards Calgary.
Okay.
And just dropped them off there, and that's where the tracks stopped there.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have any food for them. They didn't have any tents for them or anything.
They just left. They're like, here you go.
They just dropped them off so they could start to work on Monday morning, and then I guess on Monday then they did start to bring things in.
Yeah.
Take care of them, but they were dropping them off to to be there to work all summer.
Mm-hmm.
So they came to the house, which the house is quite a long ways away from there.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the creek, and asked if they could get some food.
Mm-hmm.
So so they fed all these guys.
Yeah.
Which it was pretty amazing, because this is the early 1890s.
Yeah.
The really and Jim Crow was really into force.
Mm-hmm.
They might well have never seen black people before.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a rural area, very isolated.
Yeah.
And of course there was incredible prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
And so they fed them, which they used all the bread for the week.
Yeah. They would take a good bit.
So they, and apparently, I never even heard this part of the story, but I'm sure they had to bake bread again, which would have been a big deal, because you very much had your routines. I mean, Monday you did the wash.
Yeah.
And Tuesday you did the ironing, and those things took the day, and there was something you did each day, and you didn't have time to do other stuff.
Yeah.
So this it was a really huge thing to to just give the mainstay of the food away for the whole week, and then have to do something different. But they did it, and then these guys, of course, they were there working all summer, and they worked 12 hours a day at least, sometimes longer. And what they were working on was building, they changed the creek,
Mm-hmm.
and then they put, that big fill in where the railroad track.
Yeah, and all manually too, like.
Yeah. I mean, it was, there was no machinery used unless it was, a horse pulling it, or, but mostly it was wheelbarrows and men. And so they worked all summer to make that bed for the railroad, which, some places is like 20 feet above the creek, and it's all filled.
Yeah,
and
that's
they
incredible.
Actually changed the route of the creek to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So they were working really hard, but every day when they got done, they came and helped at the barn.
Oh wow!
And helped, they helped like do the thrashing and and different stuff.
Yeah.
So it was this relationship based on giving them that food that first night.
That initially,
that went on all summer. So that's always been a really impressive story for me.
That's pretty standout.
And then the other the other one that Poppy was born on January 4th, 1889. Okay, so the Johnstown flood. It's less than 100 miles away.
Yeah, we're really close to
One
them.
of the biggest things. I mean, it was. I mean, it was a huge news event all over the world.
Yeah.
And changed so many things in this country. But the thing that's always amazed me was the day that they found out about the Johnstown flood was the day Poppy was born.
Oh wow.
So a place less than 100 miles away.
Yeah.
This event that by that time, the news was all over the
Oh
world.
gosh, yeah.
But that's how communication was in those days.
Yeah.
I mean, they only lived a mile from town, but it was that day that they heard about the flood.
Yeah, like that's crazy. That's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, imagine. I mean, you can't imagine that.
No,
I mean,
you can
it's
like, especially with how
yeah,
things are so instantaneous now.
Yeah.
There's no comparison.
But it gives you some idea of how people live. I mean, just
Yeah, especially news like that, which is pretty high
Yeah.
priority news. Like that's not something you're gonna be like, oh, by the way, like,
yeah, the whole world was hearing about it, but
you're right on top of it, and it takes a little longer.
yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, that really contextualizes things. Okay, so, and then for question 6, what major areas has our family lived in here? Well, I mean, I guess either back, for in their origins, or whether you want to, mainly addressing the U.S., I suppose.
Yeah. Well, the Marburgers came from somewhere apparently around Marburg, Germany. Thinking is now that it wasn't actually Marburg itself, but somewhere in that area. And of course, interestingly, on the boat coming over from Germany, there was another Marburger family who was from Alsace-Lorraine. So the boat sailed to Baltimore, and everybody got off the boat in Baltimore, and they all walked to Harmony. Okay, so from Baltimore, Maryland to Harmony, PA, they all walked.
That is, that's quite the distance.
Yeah, but that wasn't unusual then. I mean, the toll road, which is US 40 now. I mean, there was when you read the toll charts, there was a chart for people.
Yeah.
Because lots of people walked. And so camp along the road. So they walked to Harmony, and then of course eventually so it was my, let's see, so it was my great and my great grandfather who came over, father and son. The mother had died before they left Germany, so the son ended up marrying one of the Marburger women from Alsace-Lorraine.
Okay.
So Marburger married Marburger.
Okay.
They all went to Harmony, and then 4 years later, my three great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather bought the farm and moved to Evans City. So of course that's been the two places they've lived.
Yeah.
And the McCandlesses, they settled the farm there, which is like right beside Marine State Park now. And I think it was 1795 or 6. The Suttons were in Evans City in the 1800s, early in the 1800s. I'm not sure exactly when. And of course, the Waldrons and Walls were there from right after the right after the Revolutionary War. From then on. Well, actually, Grandma McCandless Eva, she was actually born in Traverse City, Michigan, even though her mother lived. Her mother had grown up right beside McCandless Farm, but somehow her parents were in Traverse City and they were only there for a few years, and she was born there before they moved back, and then most of her life she lived in the same place, but there were a couple of years where they were out in Michigan. And the Fairs lived around Homer City. There's a big coal-fed power plant that occupies the farm that Grandma Seth grew up on. And then they moved to Conway. So when I was little, they lived in Conway in a house that you could. I liked to stand at the back window and look out at the railroad yard. I had no idea I was looking at the biggest railroad yard in the world.
Oh, really?
Watch all the trains moving around.
Yeah, that's cool.
So they lived there. So. Guess that's everybody.
Cool. And for question 7, what churches have played a major role in our family history? I mean, I could, I don't think I need to ask for other religious institutions. I'm pretty sure it's primarily churches, I think, with our family, from what I understand. I mean, but if there's an exception to that, I mean,
Well, of course, Marburgers were, Lutherans, and they helped to start St. Peter's, and so it was 1849. So it wasn't, too long after they got here, because there were lots of Germans in the area, and my dad had a first cousin, one of the oldest first cousins, who was an ordained Lutheran pastor. The McCandlesses were Presbyterian, which was pretty standard for Scots-Irish. And I mean, apparently the church was always important because they always, all Grandma's siblings, they all were active in churches. And I'm trying to think, all of them were Presbyterian. Just trying to get through in my mind and kind of double check, but I'm pretty sure they all stayed Presbyterian except for Grandma and Aunt Hazel, who both became Lutherans. The Suttons were, I'm a little fuzzy. I think the Fairs were Methodist, and I think the Suttons were too, but then I don't think they became Presbyterian until the Methodist Church in Evan City closed, I think was what the deal was there. In the last 50 years, there's just been so many churches that started that just weren't around. So, and basically, the Baptists in Virginia made a big stink in colonial times, because the Church of England was there, and there was this real expectation that you were part of it, and so the Baptists kind of came in there, and I'm not exactly sure how that started, but that was very controversial, and people would leave the church and join that, and it was really lots of tension over that. But in a lot of places that wasn't happening. There were, basically, churches were established on ethnicity or nationality, and pretty much you didn't switch, and people within the Protestant churches, there was not a lot of tension over marrying into another one, although there was some. There were, the expectation was that you'd stay with whatever you were, but but between Roman Catholics and the Protestant churches, there was lots of. A cousin of my dad's married a Roman Catholic, and her family, she became Lutheran. Her family basically disowned her.
Holy cow.
And it was a huge scandal. I mean, for him to marry a Catholic was,
But at least, like, he got the benefit that she became Lutheran and he didn't become Catholic. So.
And and so there was still a lot of that, and that was still around when I was a kid, and the only time I remember really being aware of it was in 7th grade. I had this friend I got to know from coming home on the bus at night, because I didn't ride the bus in the morning because I rode the milk truck. And so he was my age, but he wasn't in my class, but I got to know him on the bus. And we started going to basketball games together. And I don't know, probably wasn't until 8th and 9th grade. And he was Roman Catholic, which for a while I didn't even realize it, I don't think, because I knew kids that were Roman Catholic, and there were other ones that I had been friends with, and it was never an issue. One of them was a granddaughter of the guy that my dad was named for, so I would talk with her a lot on the bus, and I had a real crush on her. She was a couple years older than me. But when I started going to basketball games with this kid, and usually Jean Sutt would take us, because she would go to the games too, so she'd pick me up, and then we'd pick him up and go. And I remember one day Grandma Sutt said, "Well, he's Catholic, isn't he?" And I was like, "Well, I think so," and then she said something about, she couldn't believe that, it was one that, that they were taking this Catholic kid to a basketball game or something, and I was like, I was just like kind of stunned. And I don't remember. I can't remember Jean saying anything, but we kept doing it, and I never heard anything more about it outside of that one time, and I was just like, whoa. But it was still, it was still really something. Well, then a second cousin of mine in '66, I think it was, he married a Catholic girl, and that was, there was a lot of twittering about that.
Not as big a deal as prior, but people still like, I don't,
it
wasn't doing that.
It wasn't. No one was disowning anybody, but it was
frowned upon.
It was like, kind of, what are you doing? And then he was a nephew of the Lutheran pastor too, which was, although his uncle had never, lived around there. So it was.
And then I know, like, this is a lot later, but my mom was obviously Lutheran and my dad was obviously Catholic. Like by that point, there wasn't really any. Like it was pretty normal. I'm assuming. Because that was a lot later on.
Well, there wasn't. I mean, people were they just kind of say, "Oh,"
Yeah.
by that time.
Yeah. It had been watered down a good
But
bit.
it was still, yeah, like your dad wanted his godfather to read one of the lessons,
Hmm.
and we thought he was going to. And then a couple of weeks beforehand, he told him he wasn't allowed to.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And he said, "I'm really not even supposed to come to the wedding, but I'm going to come." You know, so the priest wasn't supposed to be coming to the wedding. Wasn't allowed to read scripture
Mhm.
in our church, which
Mhm.
prompted me to write a lengthy letter to Bishop Worrell, expressing my dismay at what he was done.
Yeah,
and,
like-
and his response, when your dad read his response, then he never went back to the Catholic Church after reading that
Yeah.
response.
That's frustrating.
And it was interesting at the wedding because, we used the common cup, which I thought would probably, I said, we're not fooling around with classes for 300 people.
Yeah.
And I said, so people from our church probably won't commune because we use the common cup all the time,
Mhm.
but you could also use a pouring chalice.
Mhm.
And so only a small part of the people use the common cup.
Mhm.
So I said, well, our side won't take it. And the Catholics, they're not allowed to take it.
Yeah.
And everybody communed,
Oh wow. That's cool.
except for the priest
Yeah.
and one person from St. John's
Uh huh.
who didn't because of the common cup.
Mhm.
But when the service was over, I said to your dad, I said, what happened?
Yeah.
Because we were just like, I was like kind of dumbfounded. And
Mhm.
he said, well, I don't know, but he said, I could see all these lines of whispering going to the priest.
Yeah.
And so he said, so I'll find out. So pretty quickly he found out that the priest was telling the people to go ahead,
That's cool.
which was really amazing. 'Cause
Yeah.
he, if somebody would have squealed on him, he probably would have got seriously reprimanded
Yeah.
for
Yeah. Considering like the context with that guy not even being able to attend. And so then with question 8, like what are our best family heirlooms, or is there like one particular family heirloom you could think of? Like this was a question that kind of came more of my curiosity. Like I wasn't sure if there was something or if there was nothing. I didn't know.
Excuse me. Well, this chair was Grandma Walls,
Okay.
who was my great-great-grandmother. Okay?
Hmm.
And she died in the 1890s. And then, she died in the 1890s. And her husband had 2 more marriages after she died, because the second one died, and then he married a third time. And he and the third wife gave the baptismal font at St. Peter's.
Okay.
That's still there. So where you were baptized, where your mom was baptized.
St. Peter's, is that? Which one is that? Is that the one? Is that Newcastle or
Evan City.
Evan City? Okay, that's the one. Yeah. Okay, I know which one then. Yeah.
So that font was given by my great-great-grandfather and his third wife,
Hmm.
because the first one whose chair this was,
Hmm.
she died when the children were relatively young, and the
Mhm.
second wife, she only got 3 or 4 years, and then he married a third one. And I'm not sure, no, he didn't have any children with the third one. I don't think there were any with the second one either. So this was hers,
Okay.
and and I don't know how it got from her to Uncle Mart, who was the oldest grandchild in the Marburger part of the family. I don't know the Wall family well enough to know where he was, but he died. He was born after she died. She didn't meet any of the grandchildren because she died, or at least any of the Marburger grandchildren, because she died in the 1890s.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow Uncle Mart had the chair.
Mm-hmm.
And the chair was built in the 1840s. There's no metal in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's burley maple.
Have you had it refinished at all, or?
Well, yeah, because it was Uncle Mart. He had gone bankrupt during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
He had a meat market in Evan City. And so in the 1950s, he was living in a boarding house in Evan City.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a block from the church. It's a big house, Victorian with a big turret.
I think I know the one. Yeah, it stands out.
Yeah. So he lived in a room there, and he had this chair. And so camp, we hadn't had too long, and
Mm-hmm.
so one time we went to camp, he took this chair and gave it to them to use at camp.
Okay.
It had so many coats of paint on that you couldn't see any of this stuff here. This was just like a solid thing.
Oh wow, that's a lot of paint.
And the seat was a piece of plywood. And so it was in the living room at camp for a while. Uncle Mart died in 1960. And somewhere by 1970, or well, even before 1970, it had been put back in the bedroom where Nemo and I sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And because people didn't like it because it was so short. See how it's...
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But for Meemaw, it was great because
Mm-hmm.
she's short and it fit her perfectly.
Yeah.
So she kind of liked to sit in it. So when she got pregnant with your mom, she said she wanted a ladder-back rocker.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, there's that ladder-back rocker at camp. It's back in the bedroom. Nobody likes it. You like it.
Mm-hmm.
So we should just get that.
Yeah.
So we asked Grandma, and she said, yeah, we could have it. So she said, you can have it, but you just have to take another chair to take its place.
Okay, fair enough, yeah.
So you remember that chair we burned last year, I think it was? It was set under the deer head.
Yeah,
That
yeah, another
green
one.
chair.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we took that thing up
Okay.
and got this. So her dad took it and had it dunked, which you can't do.
Mm-hmm.
He took it to this place, now the tank and stuff, and he put it in and it took all the paint off.
Huh.
So it took it down to the original wood.
Yeah, like a pretty powerful chemical like strip.
Yeah. So that was when we did that. That's when we found out that there's no metal. It's all put together with wooden pegs.
Yeah, like you see the wooden pegs and stuff.
Yeah. And of course it still had the plywood seat, so the plywood had been painted and stuff too, so it stripped it off.
Mm-hmm.
So then he put this finish on.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got it right about the time your mom was born. So we had it when she was baptized, and we had a big party. So it was a month after she was born.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought we were going to lose the chair before the party was over, because like Martin was named for Mart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because Uncle Mart's name was Martin.
Yeah.
So Jenny, Martin's wife, when she saw the chair, she said, well, Martin was supposed to get that chair, and we just never got it. Well, Uncle Marty's been dead for 12 years.
Yeah.
They had 12 years to get the chair.
Yeah.
And she never expressed any interest. But she was like,
Well, when she saw it without the paint and
yeah,
stuff, and
yeah,
like
well,
in
it's
the
finished.
better
Yeah,
condition,
she
yeah.
wanted it. Well, then Jean, I don't know, you probably don't remember Jean, my dad's sister. She was really into antiques.
Mm-hmm.
So she wanted it, and she was the one. She said, "Well, it's burly maple," and
Going
she,
all over it.
Yeah, she knew a lot of history, which we didn't, which we didn't know. But she never had expressed any interest in it. I mean,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
it was up there. So everybody's like, like. Of we have them over, we're gonna lose our chair.
Yeah, yeah.
So
They're gonna loot the place.
So finally, after a couple hours, all this around, Grandma said, "It's their chair. I told them they could get it. They got it all fixed up, and it's theirs.
Thank goodness.
And nobody else is getting it."
Nice. That's cool.
So that was it. And then. And we also had a lot of nice stuff from Grandma Canlis, and you guys had one of the rockers, which I don't know what happened to it.
Which one? Was it? Oh yeah, I know the one you're talking about. The one we had in our den for a while.
Yeah, that was Grandma Canlis's.
That was an interesting piece. That was an interesting rocker.
And then your that secretary that's your mom's. It's in Carissa's room.
Mm-hmm.
Grandma Marburger sold magazine subscriptions when she was like 12 or 13 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the prize for selling those magazine subscriptions, was that secretary.
Man, that's a great prize.
And
Don't do that stuff anymore.
And when Grandma McCandless died, when the will was read, and I wasn't there, but I for some reason, I very distinctly remember Grandma telling me about this. When the will was read, the will said that the secretary was Grandma's.
Mm-hmm.
Grandma McCandless didn't leave it to Grandma. She just noted in the will that it belonged to Grandma,
Okay.
and Grandma had never got it.
Yeah.
It had always been
Yeah.
there. So when your mom was 2 years old, and so Grandma McCandless had died in 62, so now it's 74, and Grandma had never got the secretary.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to her, would you give that secretary to us forever? Because it had always been in Evan's house.
Yeah.
So we went, she said, well, yeah. So we went to get it. Well, by that time, her brother, Uncle Stanley, had always lived at home.
Mm-hmm.
And so when his mother died in 62, he just kept living there. Well, there were 3 boys. It was Stanley and Porter and Blair.
Mm-hmm.
And so Stanley was the oldest boy, but he was 8 years younger than Grandma. Porter died in the teens, and he was like 14 or 15, I think, when he died. He died the year after their father, so I think he died in like 16 or 17. And then Blair was younger yet than him. Blair was only, I think, like 8 or 9 when his father died. And in the 1930s, something happened to Blair and his body became rigid.
Mm-hmm.
He could not bend at the waist.
Mm-hmm.
He could move his arms, he could move his legs, but he couldn't bend at the waist.
Okay.
So he could never sit down, he could never sit in a car. If he went anywhere, you had to have like a station wagon and you just slid him in.
Huh.
And so his wife had to take care of him. Well, she died in think it was either 68 or 69, she died.
Mhm.
So when she died, Stanley moved in with Blair to help him. And before that, Stanley had kind of invented a bed for him, and what he did, he had a car battery, and he hooked it up to this thing, and so when I think you connected the battery or something, and Blair's bed would go up like this,
Mhm.
and so then when his feet stood on the ground, he could walk with crutches.
Mhm.
And then he had to go back to bed, he stood against the bed, and you push the button and the bed
Yeah, went
went
back down. Yeah.
So Stanley had moved into the house to take care of Blair. And so the house where they'd all grown up was sitting empty. And you can't see it from any road. It's in the middle of the farm and it's kind of down. So we went to Stanley and Blair's house to see about getting the secretary.
Mhm.
And Stanley wasn't there, and Blair said, well, it's Stanley's house, so he didn't want to say anything. So finally we decided, and Stanley didn't have, he would never have a telephone. He'd had a telephone in the 1930s and he got mad at the phone company and took it out, and he never had a phone again. He died in 1999, and he had still never had a phone.
Yeah.
So it was really hard to get a hold of him. So Grandma said, well, let's just go over to the house. Now, I got to go back to the next year when, before I tell you the rest of the story.
Mhm.
So that spring, we had gone out to Aunt Lois's in Warsaw, Indiana to pick Grandma up. She had been out visiting.
Mhm.
And we went out to pick her up, and she'd been there for a couple of weeks. And of course her mom was along. She was like 2. Well, she wasn't quite 2 then. So it was in January. She was 2 in April. So when we got there, Grandma and Aunt Lois, the whole time they had been working, trying to remember this poem that they had both memorized when they were children,
Mhm.
when they were at school. And it was called The Red and White Calf.
Okay.
And so after 2 weeks, they thought they had all the verses together, and they had written them all down. And so they recited it to us several times when we were there. And in the course of the conversation, Aunt Lois said that the cradle that they were all rocked in when they were children was still in the house where they grew up. It was in the attic.
Yeah.
So, and she said it had been her mother's cradle, so it would have been Eva's cradle,
Mhm.
and then it was used for all of those children.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, when we asked Grandma about the secretary, we were also talking about the cradle.
Mhm.
So Marge and Gary and Rita were with us, because Gary had a pickup truck, and so we had his truck to haul the thing on, and so we were in a car. It was actually Martin Jennings' car, which was a big Oldsmobile with a giant trunk. And so Grandma said, well, let's just go over and, we'll just see if the house is open and get the secretary. Of course, the house was open. There was no electricity on. The refrigerator had been unplugged with all the food in it. And it had been 3 or 4 years since anybody had lived in the house.
Yeah.
The piano had started to break through the living room floor.
Mhm.
Stanley just walked out the door.
Yeah.
His clothes were there. There was a stack of T-shirts that had never been taken out of the package. The church bulletins were stacked up this high up to the last Sunday he lived there.
Mhm.
And then, and the stack just stopped. So we walk into the house and everybody's kind of looking around. And I walk into the parlor, which was the traditional parlor. Usually the only time it was used was to lay a body out.
Mhm.
And I walk into the parlor, and here's the secretary, which I had seen as a little kid,
Mhm.
but it didn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
And so, this was the first time that I had seen it in, like 13 or 14 years.
Yeah.
And now it had a whole different meaning to me.
Yeah.
And so I walk over to it, and I, open it,
Mhm.
and here's this ledger
Mhm.
laying there. And I open up the ledger, and the page that I open it to has the red and white calf written out in longhand.
Oh wow.
It's a poem that
Yeah.
I'd never heard until a few months before.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was the eeriest thing.
That's a crazy
And I'm
coincidence.
like, oh my goodness. So, and so I'm just standing there. I don't think I'd even yelled yet to tell them that I found the secretary.
Mhm.
And then I start looking, and the ledger was started by Grandpa McCandless. And it was started before he married Grandma McCandless.
Mhm.
So before Joseph married Ella. And up until he died, he recorded every single thing that he bought or sold
Wow.
in this ledger. And when he died, Grandma McCandless kept it up for another decade or so.
Hmm.
I mean, everything.
Yeah.
Every pound of butter, every pair of shoes, every coat, every cow, every pig, every single thing that was bought or sold.
That's crazy.
So it started in the 18. Well, it must have been the mid-1880s. Mid to early 1880s. I forget which year they got married. It started before they got married,
Mhm.
and went through into the late 20s or early 30s.
Mhm.
So everything was in. So the ledger is still at Grandma's house.
Mhm.
One of the other things we got that day was the potato tureen that had come from Ireland.
Mhm.
And it was a tureen, ceramic glass,
Yeah.
and had a lid
Mhm.
with a potato on it.
Mhm.
And I asked Marge about it last year, or maybe it was this spring,
Mhm.
and she said the lid had been broken. And I was like, oh, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that's rough.
Came from Ireland 220 years ago, and so it's broken. So that day we ended up, Grandma was so upset that the house wasn't being taken care of and the furniture was all there. So
Yeah.
basically what happened, if we said we liked something, she said take it.
Oh, that's great.
So we filled the pickup truck, we filled the trunk of the car, we
Mhm.
filled every place where we weren't sitting was
Yeah.
filled. That's where we've got those green depression wear glasses that we
Yeah.
use.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were Grandma McCandless's, and then there's some crystal ones they have the grapes on. They're in the
Yeah. Yeah. I know those. Yeah.
Those were Grandma McCandless's. I mean, we got that rocking chair. The cradle. After we were looking for a while, I said, well, the cradle's supposed to be in the attic. I said, how do you get to the attic? Well, there was just a hatch up to the attic.
Mhm.
And so Gary reached up. No. And Gary he was a lot thinner when he was young.
Mhm.
And he reached up, got a hold of the rafters, and he
Yeah.
pulled himself up. And when his eyes got above the floor, he said, it's right there.
Oh, nice.
And the cradle's right there. So we got a chair and got up and got the cradle out. Well, it was like cardboard. It was so dried out. It had been in the attic for over 100 years.
Holy cow.
Not been touched.
Yeah.
And so Marge, she rubbed wax and oil and stuff in it. And then, so your mom never slept in it,
Mhm.
but Miriam and Nathaniel both did,
Mhm.
and then a whole bunch of other people, and it's floating around somewhere now, but I can't remember. I asked Marge,
Mhm.
and she did know where it was, but I
Mhm.
can't remember. So that one was really special too,
yeah.
to have that. Yeah.
Sage.
Yeah. So this one was kind of a big one, and then lots of other stuff.
Yeah. For 9, what is the best anecdote / saying that has been passed down in our family? Like, I mean, I don't know, there might not be any per se, but
Yeah.
I figured that I'd at least ask.
Yeah, I don't think, yeah. No, I'll say.
Well, I mean, short of that, I mean, you could, like, you say Garsh a lot, and I know that that's not, it's separate from that, but, like, I mean, where did that come from? Like, because you don't hear
I don't
people say
know.
that a lot.
It's probably Pittsburghese, but I don't really know.
It might be, actually, yeah. I don't hear it on Pittsburghese. Like, honestly, I don't. Like, it really gets watered down by the time you get up to
I have to look on
Greensburg.
that T-shirt and see if Gosh is on there.
Yeah.
I think it's probably Pittsburghese, but I don't know. One story that the older grandchildren talked about, which when I'm saying the grandchildren, I'm talking about my dad's generation.
Yeah.
And of course, my dad's grandfather died before he was born. He died in 1925. My dad was born in 1930, so he never knew him. But the oldest grandchild was born in, I think, 1900 and 1901.
Mhm.
Yeah, so there were a lot of them that knew him. And so the ones that knew him, they said, boy, now, I don't know if you remember. Do you remember the maple tree that used to be in front of the house? Big maple tree?
I think I do.
Well, so Grandpa Marburger, so this is my great-grandfather, John. He was really a big person, like 300 pounds.
Mhm.
And really strong. Like they said, he'd pick up a calf with one hand and throw it up on a wagon.
That's insane.
And that. So he, so when these kids were little, he liked to sit under that tree, in the summer, in the shade, and then the kids, he'd tell them they wanted a drink. So they had to go to the spring and get them a drink.
Mhm.
And the spring was under the garage.
Mhm.
And the garage was there then, so you walked down around behind it, and like on the side towards where the swimming pool was,
Mhm.
there was like there were posts on one side and then a stone wall on the other side.
Yeah.
And then you walk back about 15 feet or so, and then there was a heavy wooden door
Mhm.
that didn't have any latch on it.
Okay.
And you opened the door, and then the spring was inside there, and
Mhm.
there was a trough around 2 of the walls.
Mhm.
So the water ran, and so that's where you kept stuff cold.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then at the end where the water came in, that's where you'd fill a dipper with
Yeah.
water and take it to him to drink.
Okay.
And that was, and of course the kids didn't like to do that because the spring was kind of, you kind of went down under the ground, and it was kind of scary for little kids. And
Mhm.
that. But when he told you he wanted a drink of water, you get
You give him a drink.
and get going.
Not to get too off topic, but like that was stone then. That bottom area with the trough and stuff.
Yeah.
Is that still there?
Well, they
Like it's filled over, but
And they built this new garage. I think they just covered it up. I don't think they took it
okay.
out.
I was gonna say because it'd be cool to see that, but it'd be like it's not really
Well,
accessible.
the spring got ruined in World War II.
Mhm.
There was a gasoline pipeline going from Texas to New York City that
Mhm.
right up by the road,
Mm-hmm.
and it leaked.
Okay, and that
And
contaminated it.
Well, it got into the vein of water, and it changed. Hardly any water was coming through.
Okay.
So it disrupted the flow of water, and Poppy, for the last 10 years of his life, he fooled around with the spring all the time, trying to get it to flow more and get and I never drank out of it because, I mean, the water looked okay, but I was never allowed to drink it.
Yeah, that's a shame. And so for question 10, we touched on this a good bit already, with all the stuff we talked about with the dairy. But like, what are some of the occupations of our ancestors?
Well, one of the things I've always found really fascinating is Grandma McCandless.
Mm-hmm.
So she was born in 1869.
Yeah.
And so she had, eight or nine daughters and 3 sons. And the one daughter died young. She was like 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of them all lived to be adults. She sent all of the daughters to normal school, which is college.
Yeah.
So when Grandma Georgie died, she was the oldest graduate of Slippery Rock.
Okay.
Okay. But she and all of her sisters went to Slippery Rock.
Okay.
Okay. So this was the very early 1900s.
Yes, that's
when women did not.
that's very standout.
Yeah.
That's not the norm.
Yeah, they all went, and they all became teachers.
Uh-huh.
And she was very deliberate about that. She was also, none of them had middle names.
Mm-hmm.
Because she said, when you get married, your middle name will be McCandless.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't want the McCandless name lost.
Okay, that's cool.
But Rella never married, so she was just Rella McCandless.
Mm-hmm.
But she taught her whole life. She taught, until she retired when she was, I think, in her 70s when she finally retired.
It's a long career.
But all the girls went to school.
Mm-hmm.
The boys didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, which, I don't know which is more unusual.
Yeah,
because anybody else, if they sent somebody, it would have been boys. But she was adamant that the girls go because she wanted the girls to have a way to make a living.
Okay. And so she kind of figured with the guys, they would have access to making a living anyway. Yeah.
They would have the farm. But the girls would, they all became teachers, and that was pretty amazing that she did that. And no one ever said, but I've always kind of had the feeling that Grandpa McCandless, I think, might have been pretty rough. I think he might have been kind of difficult. But no one ever said it. I think from little hints that I've got here and there that he had a typical Irish temper. I don't know, but I have a feeling that had something to do with it too. But that's just a feeling. I don't know, but I've always thought that was pretty significant. That here was somebody.
Yeah.
Her daughters were coming of age and the zeros and the teens, and she made sure that they all went to school. And then after he died, she made the ones that were younger go too, which were really tough because income was challenging to get. And it kind of piggybacked in with that when Porter died, because the first the father Joseph died, and I think he died in 1915 or 16, shortly after Grandma got married, and then Porter died like the next year, and Margaret, the little sister, died in there too. So 3 of them died within like 2 years. And 2 of the children were father. Stanley was born on December 30th, 1899. So when his father died, Stanley was like 16 or 17. So, you know, all the farm work fell to him or not Porter. And then Porter died. So here was Stanley, he was 17 or 18 years old, and basically supporting, you know, 6 or 7 siblings still at home.
Yeah.
Plus his mother, and plus this huge farm to take care of. So by that time, of course, Grandma and Papa were married, and Hazel and Wally were married. And so he asked, you know, Papa and Wally if they knew somebody that could help them. So the person that they sent to help them was Papa.
Okay.
You know, and I didn't know this until after Papa died. And so he went and stayed there at least one entire summer and maybe 2. And so he and Stanley became lifelong friends over that. And I knew as a kid that they were friends, but I had no clue that's how we became friends, because he went there and lived with them, you know, worked with Stanley till on the farm, and we had to get all this stuff done.
That's cool.
Yeah, so and of course, Papa, I think he did some other, well, I know he did some other stuff when he was younger. He worked some with oil wells and stuff, gas wells, but fairly early on, he got into J&L Steel, and that's where he retired from. He had to retire a little bit early because he had a murmur in his heart, because he was a crane operator did I say J&L?
I think so, yeah.
Not J&L. American Bridge,
Okay.
which was a division of U.S. Steel.
Yeah, yeah.
It was American Bridge, he was real proud of. They made the steel for the bridge in West Virginia, the huge bridge that goes over the New River.
Yeah, I think I know the one you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really famous bridge, but American Bridge made the steel for it. So he worked for American Bridge, retired from there.
And you said he had a heart murmur, and like that's not something you really want if you're a crane operator. You don't want to have an issue with that.
Yeah, because you're moving 30 tons of molded steel sometimes.
Yeah.
And you don't want anything to go wrong with
That's
that.
understandable.
So, but it wasn't too, I'm not sure. I think he was maybe 62 or something. It was a little earlier than he would have retired. And so let's see, so what we did, what else do I know about? Well, so Grandpa McCandless was a farmer. Grandpa Sutton, so great grandfather Sutton. He worked for B&O, and he was he watched the crossing in Calgary.
Okay.
They didn't have, the arms that went down.
Yeah.
So you had people that watched, and when the train was coming, they went out with a lantern.
Okay, so they were like a manual signal almost, like how you have now. They have those automated signals and stuff for crossings.
But he was killed at the crossing in Calgary, going to work on there, and it wasn't. He was coming to be the watchman.
Yeah.
And his car was hit by a train as he crossed the tracks to put the car to work.
That's like.
So it was like
It's terrible.
1926, I think.
That is gonna sound really bad, but like if you need any more like proof that you're doing an important job, like your job is dangerous enough to get you killed as well, like what you're doing to prevent Like that's crazy.
Well, railroads, I mean, we don't realize today how dangerous railroads were, you know, up until, they, I don't know, it was really into the 40s and the 50s before they started, probably really in the 50s before they started to kind of, you know, for a long time, you know, this was changing before that, but, you know, this was reiterated when we took Paul to the railroad museum this summer. The couplers were these literal things you had to put a pin in.
Yeah.
And you know, and people were just maimed and killed left and right by those.
Yeah.
And the railroad wouldn't do anything about it.
Well, yeah, because
it was
I mean,
cheaper to just kill people off and maim people for life.
Part of that labor relation back then.
I mean, if you got hurt, too bad. You lose an arm or a leg.
They didn't have any real incentive to care back then.
You know, if you get killed, or you know, the one story they tell there at the thing that you know, the cars came together and the guy was in the middle, and he was still alive. And so got the priest and his wife and stuff, and you know, and then you know when they unpinned it, then it was done. You know, and they just the routinely did that. So you know, so people get killed. You know, crossings was. You know, just
well, and like they've done a lot to fix that, and like as a testament to how dangerous it was, it's still dangerous now. Even with all the safety improvements, all the effort that they've gone through to make it safer, you still have casualties. Like back then, there was nothing, like very little to compared to what we have now to keep people safe. Like I guess just some of those hard lessons over time. And
and then kind of a little side, like one of Poppy's cousins was John Irvin, and he started Citizens Bank in Evans City, which is now next here. So it's his cousin that started that. He was a cousin that Papa was not fond of. Didn't like it at all.
It's a little bit of a standout. That kind of like is separate.
I never got the story of what the friction was between them and the brother.
Well, I mean that's a very different sort of thing almost to get into than some of the other occupations you see pop up. You know, like starting up a bank is, I mean, not that different, but different enough that it kind of stands alone.
So he was a cousin, I think, through the Baldwins. So, okay, that's the occupations.
So,
well, of course, your Mima's dad he was a steel worker too.
Yeah, that was a big thing.
And then her grandfather Buffington, I forget what he eventually retired from. I think he was a coal miner, but then, and Grandma Dee didn't know this until I think it was last year or the year before, he was a bootlegger.
Yeah, I remember you guys talking about
Ruth
that a lot.
told her that because Grandma was talking about him taking the egg route, and Ruth said, "Oh, he wasn't delivering eggs; he was delivering moonshine."
Yeah,
and
I mean, but
she never knew that.
Yeah, at a period that so many people so many people ended up falling into that sort of thing. It just was so pervasive.
Oh yeah,
everywhere.
It was everywhere. But
that's crazy.
She always thought he had an egg route until she was like in her late 80s.
Holy cow! That's quite the time to find out.
Yeah.
Telling people he's delivering the eggs. Yeah. And like I just find it interesting to note that like since all these like families that kind of came together, since they were around so early, I kind of note that like they a lot of them ended up on the agricultural side of things. Was a lot of people came in like the big immigration periods, got kind of funneled a little bit more, or funneled themselves into more industrial side of things. Even though there was plenty of industrial going on, like in our family, like you said, with the bridge and the steel and all that.
But those were later. I mean, they
Yeah.
they all grew up on farms because all my grandparents grew up on farms.
Yeah.
You know, but they didn't all stay in farming, but they all grew up on farms.
And then for question 11, I don't know if there's one person here that comes to mind. I guess that's kind of what I'm looking for, but like, it's who has been the most influential member in our family history. Like, if you were to pick out one person that you'd say had the most impact, I guess the most impact on the direction our family has gone, like that led us to where we are today, I guess, is probably the best way to look at it. But unless you would see it differently.
Well, I mean, I probably go to Grandma Georgie because
Okay.
partially because she lives so long.
Yeah, that helps.
You know, but she was, you know, her mother insisted she go to school, so she was, she was well educated, and even though, of course, she had to stop teaching when she was married, because you weren't allowed to be married and teach. And so it wasn't any choice that you had to do.
Okay.
They would not let married women teach school.
It's so weird. Like, why? Yeah.
Well, women weren't allowed to do much of anything.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so you were allowed to teach until you got married.
And then I guess they wanted you to, your duties would then shift, and like you do the
You were supposed to.
the family raising.
And even Grandma died. And she worked in Arco Steel. But their policy was, when you got married, you could work for 3 months.
And then
After that, you weren't allowed to work for them.
okay.
Which it's just like mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's so different than what we see often today, but very much in line with everything else then.
So Grandma, with her, with her education and just her interests and stuff, I mean, I think, because starting with dairy, they did it together, and she made the butter, she made the buttermilk, and she kept the books. She did a lot of stuff with it, which even when that was happening, he was getting all the credit. But she was doing it, and her outlook then, I think, encouraged, and I found it interesting because partially I go back to the influence of Grandma McCandless, being so insistent about the education, because like Aunt Hazel, all of her children went to college. Now these were children who were born in the teens and the 20s. The last one was born in 1930. And they all went to college, which was highly unusual for anybody outside of the very wealthy. And even with the very wealthy, the daughters usually, even at that time, were going to school.
Yeah.
So for a family that the kids were born in the teens, the 20s, and the last one in 1930, every one of them took going to college. It was pretty big. And that was Grandma. Aunt Hazel along. 3 of my dad's siblings went to college, which was, still above average. So that was kind of that influence of Grandma McCandless, because when I look at the other Marburger cousins, outside of the ones that were Marburger McCandless ones, Osmus went to college, William went to college. I think that's it.
So in those two families, like, they really placed a pretty high emphasis, or they put a high value on education.
Yeah, much, and much higher than the rest of the family, and
Much higher than average.
much higher than what the national average was at the time. So,
Yeah.
so that, so that had a big, it was a big influence, and it was the women that was having influence. Through Grandma Candace and the daughters, and then Grandma always. It's hard to pin down, but she was influential in just how the family did things, and social responsibility was, it was just there. And it was, a lot rooted through the church, but just, we weren't taught to be prejudiced, which, a lot of that, it didn't just come from her, it clearly came from Marburgers too, because when you get back to what I told you about the railroad, but for her too, we didn't learn to be prejudiced, which I didn't realize how much prejudice there was and how violent it was until the stuff started showing up on TV when I was a little kid, when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And then was confronted with that in school. I wrote in 11th grade. There was an assignment to write a book report, and it could be on any book I wanted. And I chose Black Like Me, which was, did you ever hear of it?
Possibly. The name does sound familiar, but
it was a white guy who actually had stuff put in and changed the pigment of his skin, turned himself black.
Okay.
And it only lasted, for a period of months. But he was a white person from the South who moved around the South all his life, and now all of a sudden he's a black person trying to move around in the South in the 1960s. And just...
And he did it. He was doing it specifically so he could see what it was like.
What it was like to be black, and it was just horrendous. The things that, he wasn't allowed to go in front doors. He wasn't allowed to eat in restaurants. He wasn't, allowed to use restrooms. He wasn't allowed to stay in hotels. Things that, he just took for granted all his life. All of a sudden, he's the same person. He just looks different. And he can't do any of these things. And so he wrote this book about it, which was fascinating and eye-opening. And what I didn't know was, the teacher was a Southerner. And so I got a C.
Oh, wow.
And I got a C because she was outraged that I read this book. And she made it clear in her comments that the problem was that, I read a book that I shouldn't have read. Even though the assignment was to read any book we wanted to read, and it was like, and I'm like, what the heck is going on, and so you're seeing on TV, you're seeing, fire hoses and dogs being turned on, children and stuff, and it's all because they're black, and I'm like,
very forward.
I've been around black people all my life. I never experienced this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, the older I've got, the more significant, I guess, I've found it, that I was like, wow, I wasn't raised to think that way. And most people my age and my circumstances were raised to, to be that way. And that's, Grandma had a lot to do with that. And I don't ever remember hearing anything like the kind of thing that I heard from Grandma's son. So it was, it was largely from that side. And just this sense, well, and of course, Pop-Up ran for Poppy ran for the state senate in 1950, and he lost in the primary, but he ran for the state senate, of course, as a Democrat.
Yeah.
He was on the milk control board. He was appointed by the governor, who was a Democrat, to be on the milk control board. So, and Minnie was she always was a poll worker for the Democrats. Yeah, so, and the sense was, it was always taught was, the little guy, needs the government to be there for him because, nobody else is, and the rich are always going to take care of, or try to take advantage of the little guy. So you shouldn't do that. So it was like, okay, and of course, that still influences me a lot because we still find that the Republican Party is out for the rich. Donald Trump just kind of epitomizes that we don't care what we do to the poor, to the disadvantaged. We want it all for ourselves. So it came from the Marburgers too, but Grandma really reinforced that.
Yeah, you feel, especially for you, like she was, in many ways directly responsible for that with you, or like directly responsible for creating an atmosphere that was like that.
Yeah, and just and to to help you look at the world, which wasn't something that people did very much then, but I mean, she'd get upset if my cousins and I were fighting. She was trying to stop it, and oftentimes she would say, this is how war started, and it never quite made sense to me when I was growing up. And then, when I finally was older, it's like, the Tsar and the Kaiser and the King of England were all first cousins. And that's what she was talking about.
Yeah.
Because that started right before she got married during World War I. It started the year before she was married. And it radically changed the world, and so she was very aware of that, and of course went through all the stuff with World War II, and she made it clear that it was important to know about the world. So that was really influential. You know about the world, you need to know about people that are less well off than you. And you have a responsibility to do something in both of the situations to make it better in some ways. So
Yeah, I'd say it's valid. I appreciate that. But yeah, it's a great thing to carry on to have. I guess just to close, thanks for doing this interview. It's really good to get to go over these. Like I said a little bit ago, I think I want to go ahead and do something more in depth with this when I'm done with school. Just like longer list of questions, different questions, and see about that. And take some of the takeaways from this, some of the things I learned from like going through this process and refining a little bit. But thanks for doing this. Again, today is September 19th. I still can't remember the day. We're doing the oral.
It's 2018.
Yeah, the family oral history question. 2018. Yeah, you got to get the year in there too.